Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get into our short questions. This might take a little bit more time, but I want you to understand it because I've been answering it in different ways because it just keeps bouncing up to the surface. Actually, I'm bouncing this one a little higher in the list because it just happened yesterday. I wish I knew his name off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I forgot your name there, sir. That you kind of wrote this longer statement with this too. He says, I've heard about saying it's not true that we will just be getting our interest back and not the principal. Okay. So I remember having this overall conversation probably in 2020. Um, there was a room, and some of you have heard this story before, but basically I have this thing called the truth room in the back. It's got a 500 square feet. It can fit 30 people, possibly around, depending on how you set it up with that too. And so it, we used to have these NESARA meetings. We would talk about a lot of this stuff. And I had a guy that was really mad about this whole situation when we were talking about debt forgiveness. And he says, wait a second, these people, hey, listen, I'm out of debt. And it took me a lot of effort and time. Okay, pride, okay, and and a lot of effort and stick to itness, and these people who are in debt are lazy, you know, basically lazy and stupid. I'm going, I can point out people in this room who've been divorcees that literally the guy leaves him, leaves her. And I know of a very good friend of mine who taught me a lot about this sort of thing before it really happened. His wife left him, had an affair, left him in 1976, 78, somewhere in that range, with $25,000 of an American Express bill. And he had no answer how to pay this. He wasn't making anywhere near the capability because they were dual income even at the time frame. And he's got two kids, and she just left up and left, right? Sorry about my sneeze. And so he's getting all sideways on this thing. I kind of challenged him in a couple ways, and I said, he said, it's just not fair. And I said, is God fair or is God just? And he goes, I don't know what the difference is. And the whole room erupted, because everyone knows God's not ever been fair in the history of the planet. And yet he's always been just. So this conversation really is about justice and more about fairness than anything else. I'm going to come back and answer that a little bit more, but I want to show you a couple things of why this is a silliness answer. This interest conversation started popping up, and it started popping up in around 2020. And I'm going to call it out. This is one time I'm going to call out a guy, Phil Godesky, had stipulated that, well, you're not going to get you're going to pay the principal back because you paid for it. You signed for whatever that loan is, right? And you owe it, but you're going to get your interest back. And I'm like, wait a second, where is this coming from? None of it makes any sense, right? And when you kind of play with that in your brain, here's what that actually says is that he thinks it covers everyone because everyone's paid some interest. Because if you paid off your interest or you haven't, paid off your debt or you haven't paid off your debt, it's a fairness kind of thing. And yet it's nowhere in any of the documentation of the NESARA thing. And actually it's nowhere in the documentation of anything. Let's give you an example. Let's say you buy a house 20 years ago and the house is somewhere in the range. Well, I'll give you a better one. My parents bought a house in 1972, and they didn't put carpet in it. They could have put carpet in it, and it's on 5 acres. It was $49,000. They could have put it for $50,000 when we had carpet. So we walked around and poked our feet on nails for a little bit. Was what it was, right? I think they sold it in the range of like $900,000. And I think if I've looked up that property, I'm trying to dredge it up. It's like 1.8 million or something, something or other. You're talking about from 1972 to, today, 1.8 million or something around that range. Now, it's been upgraded, I mean, very significantly upgraded, but it still has the bones of a 1972 house. Nothing in the world ever appreciates, it always depreciates. The second law of thermodynamics actually stipulates that we go from order to chaos. We don't go from chaos to order. That's one of the reasons why evolutional theory is such a nutty theory, because it doesn't actually answer the second law of thermodynamics. And we always know something is created, right? Like this cup is probably one of my best cups for water drinking, right? And yet, for a fact, the first thing that's going to break down are these plastic pieces, where these metal pieces are probably going to stick around for a long time, but they're going to degrade in every way, shape, and form. And we see that with every single thing. So how come things like this appreciate? It literally makes no sense with that too. And it appreciates in a faster rate, just like how much it's going a way bigger than inflation does. The same thing is happening on health insurances, on other insurances, and happens with college tuition. I'm telling you, there's something out of order with a few of these areas in our world, okay? But there's a reason for it, okay? Now, so if you have that $49,000 house, like my parents did in 1972, let's just say you haven't even sold it yet. My parents are still alive, but they're in their late 80s and they moved around different places. So let's say they haven't moved, right? The house of my youth, and it's 1.8 million. And you go, wait a second. So now you're going to pay taxes, you're paying all these other interest and fees and everything else upon something that has gotten worse. And yet, if they refinance the house for some other reason, back in 2020, they defaulted on a loan because they actually had a loan on that house, before that. And they took a new loan out on the house for other kinds of things. But let's just say for some reason, they defaulted on a $150,000 loan. The answer is they would take that house from you and not give you a dime and go resell it in a second. That's the sickness of the nature, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about this idea called contract law. What the flock is that thing, right? So let's look at it a little closer when we look at contract law. Contract law is an agreement between parties creating a mutual obligation and enforceable by law. It's actually enforceable by common law all around the world, and by constitutional law with us too. It's legally enforceable. Has to be a mutual assent. Two people have to, or two parties, two groups, whatever that might be, have the capability to drive the situation for company to person, all these different ways, right? And it's in some states can be considered satisfied by valid substitute. Okay, well, the valid substitute would be a legal signer, okay? For instance, a power of attorney would be able to sign. Like when I was power of attorney for my father-in-law, before he passed away, I could legally sign in essence for that. Not just me, but you get my point, right? The point is there is some nature to that and allowed, okay? Let me ask you a question. Let me pull this off the screen. When you have signed a secured or unsecured loan, who signs it? Okay, let's define that for half a second. Unsecured loan would be credit cards. Would be my son just bought a piece of furniture and he had the cash for it, but he bought this kind of cool couch, right? And he did a 24 months same as cash kind of thing. And I was talking to him about, "Well, this is what it means. You pay the 24 months payment. Did you know, by the way, on no interest payments, 60% of people who have no interest payments do not make their payments all the way through to the 24 months. They don't make the equal payments to pay it off, right? If you got to make up a number, it's $2,400 over 24 months, $100, right, per month, you have that sucker paid off. And yet 60% of the people don't actually pay that off. And they love it because they're going to charge you a boatload of money. So if you paid everything but $600, they're going to charge you interest at 20, 30, whatever percent back to the beginning of the loan and calculate that through. So they're going to have compound interest. So you're going to have a big old nasty sucker might have $950 of interest because it was calculated over the length of that loan, and yet you still didn't pay that end point, right? And that's an unsecured loan. A secured loan normally is something that they can repossess. A secured loan would be a car or a house. And you have to go through layers to get secured loans, right? You've seen the difference between getting a house kind of thing versus getting getting a stereo or whatever that might be, right? A TV. It's not that big a deal when you talk about a lesser type of loan. But answer this question: who signs a secured loan? When you're at a car dealership and you go back to the financing office, who signs that loan? The finance officer. Does the finance officer of XYZ Honda dealership in your town, USA, does he legally have the capability of signing that loan? The answer is they allow. This is the sickness of the banking. They allow this stuff, but it is not legal. Think about that one for a second. It's not contractually legal. It's not a contract between two different people. We actually have title agents who actually do this in a fascinating way. And you're going, wait a second. You mean title agents are not legal? When I go forward here, oops, sorry, let me click over to this one. This is the 14th Amendment. I brought this up 100 times. 1868, excuse me. The validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law again, including debts incurred for payments of pensions, bounties, for services suppressing insurrection. What? Most people will look at it and go, I mean, they've never seen the kind of writing that happens in the 1800s. It's much more beautiful, much more detailed. And by the way, this is how the legal industry actually writes in many ways. But these words of payments and pensions and bounties is kind of unfamiliar. We're talking about debt for incurred payments. When you have a debt of an incurred payment and it's for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion. Well, that's not me, because we're not talking about insurrection or rebellion, right? They're not having insurrection or rebellion. Oh, Buck. Let me knock that one down. But neither is the United States or the states shall assume any or pay any debt or obligation incurred in the aid of insurrection against the United States. Wait a second. Or claim any loss of emancipation of slaves. This comes from the Emancipation Proclamation, right? But all such debts, obligation, claims shall be held illegal and void. You don't have to pay it. Who are the banking people? The Fed banking people, the 13 Fed bankers, create a board that is called the Fed Board. They are the ones that create this. The small banking people of the credit union, XYZ, and the small bank, whatever, outside of the 13 banks, all of them have to hook directly into the FDIC. They have no choice in the matter. This is how they work. Just like the title agents are not doing something specifically illegal because they're messing with you. They are doing it apart because the Fed requires it. Okay? So we're saying, wait a second, who's creating the insurrection, the rebellion? These Fed bankers that are central bankers and doing things illegally throughout the world. Let's go a little further with this too. I'm going to also bring up compound interest. This is a Locklord study. Texas Supreme Court upholds, this is in 2024 too, holds interest must be simple, absent express, clear, and specific provision for compounding. Now, it goes a lot of details in here, but I'm going to tell you that it's kind of coming up many, many ways how the level of compound interest has always been illegal. And by the way, like I just said, if you don't pay your loan, they're going to take that whole thing away from you, just like they would go and repossess the car. They don't give you a dime for the thing, and they go sell it at whatever rate that they want to sell it for. Where do I sign up for that deal that I got to have that? That's the nature of this. Now, let me answer one last thing, and I know we were going on 16 minutes here, but let me answer one little thing. You think that interest is a good thing because, getting your interest payments because you've always paid your debts. And I'm going to tell you, first off, the world's never fair, never has been fair in that way. But you think it's fair enough because let's say, for the heck of it, you have $250,000 of interest payments over the years. Well, first off, let's say you had a house and you bought a house in 2010 and you refied it about every 3 years because you found a way to reduce the interest, or you did some kind of thing and then suddenly figured out how to pay it in 2020. I'm making up numbers, but you found a way to pay it off. But you refied it over time frame with that too. And each time you refi it, you actually start back in the interest rates with that too. And some people, I've refied houses more times than I can count. And the reality is that what is the real interest that was really coming? Now they're re-looking at the value of the house, on and on and on. So here's what happens. If someone, let's say two women are sitting together and they go out to breakfast or whatever every Saturday morning. They're high school friends. One's made on average $35,000 a year for the last 30 years. The other one has been a big-time lawyer. She's worked for $150,000 for 30 years. That's an average of what she's made over that time frame, right? Who do you think has bought more stuff? You already know the answer, right? The woman who's made $150,000. So wait a second. What about the woman that makes $35,000? Well, she has interest, and let's just say the interest number is $100,000. Make up a number, any number you want to come up with. And don't you think that the possibility that someone who makes $35,000 versus $150,000 has made way more interest payments? And so the person who is more wealthy in essence would have more money coming back to them. Do you think that those two women, if they sit together, in a post-interest payment kind of situation, and they say, well, I got all my interest back, and the first lady's going, but dang it, I've seen your house. I mean, you buy cars all the time, and you buy this and you buy that. And she's like, what is she supposed to say? And here's the thing. It's an answer of fairness. And I'm going, guys, can we stop this fairness game? Because you can never answer fairness. You never will answer fairness. And it is the job of the idiot job of Phil to try to answer fairness. I'm not saying he's an idiot. I'm telling you, it's an idiot idea. You can never answer fairness. Nothing in the world is fair. And we tried to legislate fairness. It just doesn't work. You can only legislate justice. That's the only thing that happens. With God, you can he talks about what is just and what is unjust, right? And and not fair, just and unjust. Governments can only operate in just and unjust kinds of ideas. We can never say what's fair because that is a Scottism. That is a Joeism. That's a Maryism. Those people have different answers for what fair really is. That's the problem. That's why you can't actually get the interest back because it never was stipulated. We are not paying the interest. We're avoiding out the whole thing, but you're not going to get something back because we're not going to have a fairness game. I know that's going to piss you off. You're going to get real mad at me. You can leave comments, but be kind there because the reality is I didn't make up the rules. I'm just telling you the reality of what this has to happen like. Hope it helps. Thanks so much.